the house across the street. Daniel Reed had always wanted quiet. After years of chasing crime stories through the neon grime of the city, he dreamed of silence. Suburban stillness, porch lights at dusk, sidewalks swept clean by people with too much time on their hands. That's what Maplewood Lane promised. It was the kind of street where every lawn was trimmed, every mailbox freshly painted. Children rode bikes in lazy circles until the street lamps flickered on. Curtains glowed soft amber at night, the picture of normalcy. But across from Daniel's new rental, one house didn't fit. It wasn't abandoned, at least not officially. The grass was cut, the mailbox empty, the roof intact. But the blinds never moved. The curtains never parted. Its windows were black mirrors that stared back at him, no matter where he stood. On his first night, Daniel sat on his porch with a beer, watching the house. He told himself he wasn't watching, just noticing. But when the upstairs light flickered on and off 3 times in the span of a minute, his skin prickled. Someone lived there. Someone wanted to be unseen. The neighbours' warnings. By his second week, Daniel had met most of the block. Maplewood Lane thrived on potlucks, garage sales, and small talk over fences. People smiled easily, but their smiles faltered when he mentioned the house across the street. "Old place," said Mr. Harris, the retired mailman. "Been in that family for generations. Nice folks. Private." "Private," Daniel pressed. Harris shrugged. "Some people like their privacy." At the farmer's market, a woman named Linda leaned closer when he asked, "If you're smart, you won't stare too long at their windows." Gives people ideas. That night, he found a folded piece of paper in his mailbox. No name, no address. Just 4 words in cramped handwriting. "Stay out of their windows." First glimpse, the note should have scared him. Instead, it hooked him. Daniel was a journalist after all. Suspicion was his fuel. So he watched. At 1:13 a.m. on a Wednesday, movement caught his eye. A figure passed behind the upstairs curtain. Thin, tall, pausing at the window just long enough to let him know it wasn't random. Daniel leaned forward in his chair. Another figure followed. Smaller, then another. 3 shadows. But when the curtain twitched open a crack, only one person stood in the room. Daniel's breath caught. He blinked hard, rubbed his eyes. No, there had been 3. He was sure. The curtain dropped. The light went out. Strange routines. Over the next week, Daniel catalogued everything. He wrote times in his notebook, sketched shapes he saw behind the curtains. The patterns were odd. Lights turned on in the kitchen at 4:07 a.m., then again at 4:09. Shadows moved in the hallway, always pausing at the same spot, as if listening. And every night, precisely at 2:33 a.m., the upstairs window flickered 3 times. He tried asking Linda about it. She only shook her head. "If you want to stay, Mr. Reed, you'll learn not to notice. People who notice don't last long here." Daniel wanted to laugh, but her eyes weren't joking. The visit was a Sunday afternoon when it happened. Daniel was raking leaves, sweat dripping down his back, when a voice startled him. "Mr. Reed." He turned. A woman stood at the curb, hands folded neatly in front of her. She wore a pale blue dress, too formal for the warm day, and her smile was polite in a way that made his stomach tighten. She gestured to the house across the street. "We've noticed you've moved in. We'd like to invite you over for dinner." Daniel's throat went dry. "We? My family?" Her eyes didn't blink. "We eat at 7. Don't be late." She didn't wait for an answer. Just crossed back to the house, disappeared behind the black door, and shut it softly. The blinds never stirred. But for the first time since he'd arrived, Daniel knew one thing for certain. The house across the street was watching him. Daniel told himself he wasn't going. Every instinct screamed, "Don't cross that street." But as the clock inched towards 7, he found himself showered, buttoning a clean shirt, and staring at the black door across the road. Curiosity had always been his curse, and tonight, curiosity was stronger than fear. The door at 6:58. He knocked. The door swung open almost instantly, as if someone had been waiting just on the other side. The same woman from the curb stood there, blue dress, polite smile. Up close, Daniel noticed something unnerving. Her skin was flawless, too flawless. No lines, no blemishes, no pores. Like porcelain warmed to life. "Mr. Reed," she said as if testing his name. "We're honored you accepted our invitation." He opened his mouth to correct her. He hadn't accepted. but she'd already stepped aside, ushering him in. The house, the air inside, was cold. Not the kind of cold from air conditioning, but a damp chill, like stone walls deep underground. The hallway stretched too long, lined with family portraits in gilded frames, dozens of them, one after another. Yet every picture showed the same four faces: the woman in the blue dress, a tall man with sharp cheekbones, a boy with solemn eyes, a girl with hair the color of ash. The strange part wasn't that the faces repeated, it was that in every portrait, none of them aged. Daniel slowed, scanning frame after frame. In one, the family stood in front of a horse-drawn carriage. In another, a 1950s-style kitchen. In the most recent, they posed beside a flat-screen TV. Same faces, same expressions. Not a wrinkle different. The family. The dining room was already set. The tall man rose from his chair as Daniel entered. "Welcome," he said in a deep, controlled voice. "I'm Charles. This is my wife, Evelyn, my son, Henry, and my daughter, Clara." The children didn't smile. They only watched. The boy's gaze was steady, unblinking. The girl's eyes darted, quick and sharp, like a bird's. Dinner was roast beef, mashed potatoes, and gravy. The food looked perfect, arranged as though for a magazine photo. Daniel noticed, however, that none of the family had utensils in their hands. "Eat," Evelyn said softly. Daniel hesitated, then picked up his fork. The meat was tender, almost too tender. It melted on his tongue, leaving behind a faint metallic taste. The family watched in silence until he swallowed. The conversation. "So," Charles began, his voice echoing slightly in the room. "You are a journalist." "Was," Daniel corrected. Took a break. Charles's lips curved faintly. "Breaks are temporary things." Evelyn leaned forward. "Do you like our neighborhood?" Daniel nodded, careful. "Quiet, peaceful," Clara tilted her head. "But you watch." The fork paused halfway to Daniel's mouth. "What?" "You sit on your porch," she said. "You write in your little book. You count the lights." Daniel's stomach clenched. His notebook was always closed when he left it. Always. "How would you—" Henry interrupted, voice flat. "The shadows told us." Evelyn's smile never faltered. "Children have such imaginations." The first crack, when Daniel set down his glass. He noticed something odd. The reflection in the water showed the table, the plates, his own hand, but not the family. His pulse spiked. He blinked, looked again. The reflection rippled, warped, but the chairs opposite him stayed empty in the glass. He forced himself to swallow another bite, his throat dry. Charles spoke calmly. "We're pleased to have a neighbor like you, Mr. Reed. Someone who notices. Someone who listens." Evelyn's voice was almost a whisper. "Stay curious, but not too curious." Clara's smile flickered for the first time, quick and sharp. "Otherwise you'll see us when you shouldn't." Departure. The meal ended without warning. One moment, the plates were full. The next, they were empty, scraped clean. Daniel hadn't seen anyone move them. Charles rose, motioning toward the door. "We won't keep you, but we'll see you again." Daniel walked back across the street in a daze. His house had never felt so small, so fragile. On his porch, he opened his notebook, meaning to write it all down. But the pages weren't blank anymore. Every line was filled, neat and perfect, in his own handwriting. One sentence repeated over and over: "Do not watch the windows." Daniel didn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his notebook clutched to his chest like a shield. The words inside burned in his mind. Do not watch the windows. Yet he couldn't stop. At 2:14 a.m., he was back at the curtain, peering across the street. The house was lit again. Not steady light, but faint glimmers moving behind the curtains. The kind of glow fireflies might cast if trapped inside a glass jar. And the silhouettes were there. Only this time, they weren't just sitting. They were moving in jerks and twitches, shapes bending at impossible angles. For a moment, he thought he saw Charles's tall frame lean backward farther than any spine should allow, his head dangling inches from the floor, then snapping upright again. Daniel stumbled back from the window, heart pounding, whispers. He tried to write it down. His pen shook, but he forced words onto the page. Halfway through the sentence, the pen stopped. The ink bled across the paper in a single line, no matter how hard he pressed. The notebook's lines blurred, as if the page itself was rejecting him. And then he heard it. A whisper, soft, layered, as though dozens of mouths spoke at once just behind his ear. Daniel. He spun, but the room was empty. The whisper came again, from the corner where the shadows pooled. You shouldn't have eaten with them. The tape by morning, Daniel's nerves were shredded. He needed proof, something physical. He dug out his old tape recorder, the one he'd used in his reporting days. He set it on the windowsill facing the house, pressed record, and left it running while he forced himself to sit still, trying not to look. At dawn, he rewound the tape. Static hissed. Then faintly voices. He watches. He writes. He listens too much. His breath caught. The voices were overlapping, distorted, but clear enough to understand. And then one voice, louder, crisp as glass shattering. Tonight, he will see. The tape clicked, ending abruptly. Clara at the door that evening. Just as he was debating whether to leave town, the doorbell rang. He froze. Through the peephole, he saw her, Clara, the girl with ash-coloured hair. She stood on his porch with a small box in her hands. When Daniel opened the door, she smiled in that too quick way. Mother baked, she said. Holding out the box, he hesitated, every instinct screaming, don't take it. But before he could refuse, she added, don't worry. It isn't for eating, it's for keeping. The box was light, almost empty. When he opened it later, inside was a folded scrap of paper. On it was a single phrase, written in sharp black ink. Stop writing in the notebook. The mirror that night, Daniel avoided the windows. He sat in the bathroom, staring into the mirror instead, trying to convince himself he wasn't losing his mind. For a while, the reflection behaved normally, then it didn't. In the mirror, his reflection leaned forward while he sat perfectly still. Its lips moved without sound, forming words he couldn't hear. Finally, the sound came, ragged, broken, but his own voice. They don't live there, Daniel. They live here. The reflection's hand pressed against the glass from the other side. For a heartbeat, the surface rippled, like water disturbed by a stone. Daniel stumbled back, shattering the light bulb with his elbow. When the bathroom went dark, he swore he saw 4 other figures in the mirror. Charles, Evelyn, Henry, and Clara, standing just behind him. The decision by dawn, Daniel was shaking with exhaustion. He couldn't ignore it anymore. If the family wanted him to stop writing, it meant they feared something about the words, and if they feared it, he had to keep going. So he opened the notebook again. His hand trembled, but he forced the words down. I saw them move. I heard the whispers. They are not what they seem. The ink spread across the page in violent strokes, almost carving into the paper, and when he stopped, a new line appeared beneath his writing, one he hadn't written. Good. Now, they'll come. Daniel didn't remember falling asleep, but when he opened his eyes, it was pitch black. The air was thick, heavy, pressing against his chest. The clock on his nightstand read 12:03 a.m., and someone was knocking on his door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. The knock Daniel lay frozen. The sound came again, each rap echoing through the house. Knock, knock, knock. He forced himself up, legs trembling, and crept to the window. Across the street, the family's house was dark. No glow in the windows, no silhouettes. The knocks grew louder. Knock, knock, knock. Daniel, a voice called softly from the porch. Open the door. It wasn't one voice. It was 4, overlapping. Charles, Evelyn, Henry, Clara, woven together like a single cord. The door opens. He grabbed the baseball bat from under his bed and inched toward the door. Go away, he whispered, though he knew they could hear. The handle rattled. Daniel's blood went cold. He hadn't unlocked it. He was sure of it. But the latch slid back with a metallic click, and the door creaked open. A shadow spilled inside, not cast by anything, but crawling on its own. It stretched across the floor, climbing the walls, warping into shapes. Charles stepped through, tall and sharp. His smile stretched too wide. Evelyn followed, gliding rather than walking. The children slipped in after, their eyes reflecting faint silver in the dark. The visit. You've written too much, Charles said, voice resonating like a bell struck in a cavern. Evelyn tilted her head. But you're special. We don't want to break you. Not yet. Henry's small voice cut through. The notebook belongs to us. Daniel gripped the bat tighter. What are you? Clara's giggle sliced the air. Neighbors. They moved closer, circling him. Their steps made no sound. Their shadows twisted longer than their bodies, bending up the walls until the ceiling seemed to sag under their presence. The bargain Charles's hand reached toward the notebook on Daniel's coffee table. No, Daniel shouted, stepping between. You can't take it. For the first time, Charles's smile faltered. His hand hung mid-air, fingers twitching. Evelyn's voice was soft, almost tender. Why protect it? It only hurts you. Daniel's chest heaved. Because it's the only thing that proves you're real. A silence stretched, deep and suffocating. Then Charles lowered his hand. Interesting, he murmured. Most beg us to make it stop. The shadows speak. The walls shivered. The shadows thickened, pooling like liquid tar. From them rose voices, hundreds layered together. He watches. He writes. He sees what should stay unseen. The sound drilled into Daniel's skull. He clamped his hands over his ears, but the whispers were inside him. Clara leaned close, her lips near his ear. You can't hide from us. We're already in your house. We're already in your head. The warning. Suddenly, Evelyn snapped her gaze toward the window. The others froze. Charles's smile returned, brittle now. We'll give you time, but don't mistake mercy for safety. He leaned so close Daniel could feel his cold breath. Do not write the 7th page. And then, as quickly as they'd entered, they slipped back into the dark. The shadows shrank, retreating through the open door. When Daniel staggered to slam it shut, the street was empty. Their house stood dark, silent, as if it had never been touched. The 7th page heart pounding, Daniel rushed to the notebook. 6 pages filled with his messy scrawl stared back at him. He turned to the next blank page. His hand hovered, trembling. The family's words echoed. Do not write the 7th page. And yet, his pen moved, almost by itself. One word appeared at the top of the page. Begin. The pen wouldn't stop moving. Daniel gripped it with both hands, but the ink scrawled across the paper as if dragged by something unseen. Letters formed sharp and deliberate, nothing like his messy handwriting. You've opened it. Now you must finish. The words pulsed on the page, blacker than ink had any right to be. Daniel ripped the pen away, flung it across the room. His chest heaved, sweat pouring down his face. But when he looked back, the 7th page was no longer blank. It was filling itself. The writing line after line etched itself into the paper, curling and looping like veins spreading. The language shifted, letters jagged and unfamiliar. Some looked like ancient runes, others like scratches made by claws. And then, between the strange markings, English words appeared. They cannot be seen. They feed on attention. Your eyes give them shape. Daniel's breath hitched. The notebook wasn't just recording what he saw, it was explaining them. The glimpse. The room darkened, not because the lights went out, but because the shadows grew thick again, seeping from the corners. Daniel tried not to look, tried to keep his eyes on the floor, but curiosity won. He lifted his gaze and saw them. Not Charles, not Evelyn, not the children, not anymore. Their human shapes peeled away like masks, revealing what lay beneath. Writhing figures made of smoke and hunger. Their forms shifted with every blink. Elongated limbs, faces without mouths, eyes like hollow lanterns burning in the void. Every time he looked directly at them, they solidified. Every time he glanced away, they melted back into shadow. The notebook's words echoed in his mind. Your eyes give them shape. The children speak. Henry's voice cut through the dark, high and sharp. You see us as you want to see us. Mother, father, children. But we were never that. Clara's laughter followed, twisted and broken. We borrow faces. We wear them because you need them. Evelyn's porcelain mask smiled, but her eyes were pits. Without you watching, we fade. Without you writing, we are nothing. Charles leaned close, his form flickering between man and shadow. That is why you must stop. The defiance, Daniel's hands shook, but he forced the pen back into his grip. No, he whispered, his voice cracking. If writing gives you power, then maybe it also gives me power. He scrawled across the page. They cannot cross this line. The moment the words formed, A barrier shivered into existence around him, faint but real. The shadows recoiled, hissing. Evelyn's voice grew shrill. "You don't know what you're doing!" Daniel wrote faster. "They cannot touch me unless I allow it." Their hands froze inches from his skin, claws trembling in midair. A surge of hope cut through the terror. The notebook wasn't a curse. It was a weapon, the warning. But as he wrote, the shadows grew restless. Their forms churned, twisting violently. Charles's booming voice rattled the walls. "Do not think you are the first. The others wrote before you. And where are they now?" Daniel hesitated. His hand hovered above the page. "What happened to them?" Clara whispered. "They wrote the 7th page, and then the 8th. Henry's hollow eyes glowed faintly. "The 8th is the last, the one that binds." Evelyn leaned close, her voice low and venomous. "Finish the 7th page, and you will have no choice but to write the 8th. The choice." Daniel's pulse thundered in his ears. The 7th page was nearly filled already, black words crawling across it like ants. He had one chance to use it, one chance to write something strong enough to fight back. But every word brought him closer to the 8th page, the final trap. The pen hovered. What should I write? The shadows pressed closer, their whispers drilling into his skull. "End it now. Join us." You were chosen." Daniel slammed the pen down. "I will not belong to you." The notebook shuddered in his hands. The shadows shrieked, the air rippling with their fury. The 7th page sealed with a crack like lightning, ink hardening into scarred black lines. The house fell silent, for now. Daniel barely remembered dropping onto his couch. His whole body ached, as if the notebook had drained something essential from him. The 7th page lay closed, its surface dark and scarred like burnt paper. Silence wrapped around the house. No whispers, no shadows. For the first time in days, he almost believed he had won. But deep down, he knew the silence wasn't safety. It was waiting. The cracks that night, his dreams cracked open. He walked through the neighborhood, but every house was empty, hollow shells. The lawns were dead, the windows black holes. Only one house was lit, the one across the street. Through its glowing windows, he saw the family gathered at the table. Only this time, there were 5 chairs. The 5th sat empty, waiting for him. When he woke, the sound of scratching filled his room. The notebook was open. The 7th page had bled over into the next. The 8th page was forming itself, jagged words carving into the paper. Write or vanish. The pull Daniel tried to resist. He locked the notebook in a drawer, shoved the pen into the freezer, even left the house to walk the block in the pale dawn. But the pull followed him. The shadows of trees bent toward him, whispering. The reflections in car windows rippled with shapes that weren't his. Neighbors he'd never met glanced his way, and for a split second, their faces flickered into Charles's, Evelyn's, Henry's, Clara's. Everywhere he went, they were already there. By evening, the pressure was unbearable. The drawer rattled. The notebook pounded against it like a heartbeat. The return at midnight, the family returned. The door creaked open, though Daniel hadn't touched it. Shadows spilled across his floor. Charles's voice filled the room. "It is time." Evelyn stepped forward, her porcelain mask flawless again. "You can run from us, but the 8th page will always wait." Henry's whisper carried, "You're already writing it in your head." Clara's smile was sharp as glass. "We only need you to finish." The notebook appeared on the table, though Daniel hadn't moved it. Its 8th page gleamed faintly, blank but expectant. The bargain. Daniel raised his bat, though it felt pathetic against them. "Why me? Why not anyone else?" Charles tilted his head. "Because you look. Because you see." Evelyn added softly. "And because you wrote without fear, when others begged for mercy." Daniel's chest tightened. "What happens if I finish it?" The room hummed. Shadows quivered like water. Clara whispered, "Then we live, and so do you. With us." Henry finished. "Forever." The 8th page begins. Daniel's hand moved without consent. The pen scratched against paper, his body a puppet strung to something vast and unseen. The watchers become the watched. The words glowed faintly. The family leaned closer, their shapes sharpening, pulling substance from his writing. Daniel fought, veins bulging as he tried to drop the pen. "I won't," he choked out. "You won't trap me." The notebook shivered violently, ink bleeding across the lines. His words twisted, forming new sentences without his will. The door opens. The fifth chair is filled. The house rattled. Across the street, lights flared to life. In his mind, he saw the table waiting. The empty chair, no longer empty. The break summoning every ounce of defiance. Daniel slammed the notebook shut. The room cracked with sound like a gunshot. The family screamed. Not human screams, but shrieks of tearing metal, of stone grinding against bone. The shadows lashed at him, claws inches from his throat, but they could not touch him, not while the page remained unfinished. Charles's face flickered, his voice booming. "You cannot hold it forever. You will write, and when you do, we will be whole." Then they were gone. The house fell silent again. The notebook sat on the table, trembling faintly. Its 8th page glowed through the cover, waiting. The Cliff Daniel stared at it, sweat dripping down his jaw. He had stopped them, for now, but he knew the truth. The 8th page wasn't just a threat. It was a promise. Sooner or later, he would write it, and when he did, the 5th chair would no longer be empty. Daniel hadn't left his house in 3 days. The curtains stayed shut, every light burning through the night. The notebook sat on his kitchen table, pulsing faintly, as if it had grown a heartbeat. Every time he walked past it, he heard whispers, not just the family now, other voices, hundreds of them, tangled together. Some begged, some screamed, some only repeated one phrase, "Finish it." The breaking point, Daniel thought about running, packing a bag, driving until the road ran out. But the thought turned sour. He remembered what Charles had said. The 8th page will always wait. Even if he ran, the notebook would follow. It would appear on the dashboard, on the motel nightstand, in his hands, while he slept. There was no leaving, only writing. Across the street, on the 4th night, the glow returned to the house across the street. The curtains pulsed with faint light. Shadows moved inside, slow and deliberate. He counted them, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. The 5th shadow sat among them, still, patient, waiting. Daniel's stomach twisted. He hadn't finished the page. He hadn't written the words. But the chair was no longer empty. The 8th page fills, he rushed back to the notebook. The 8th page was no longer blank. It was writing itself, faster now. Black ink seared across the paper in jagged lines. The 5th has arrived. He does not resist anymore. He joins the family. "No," Daniel shouted, grabbing the pen. He scratched over the words, trying to blot them out. Ink splattered across the page, but the words kept forcing their way through, pushing up from beneath the paper like scars. The house shook. His walls groaned. The lights flickered, and then the door opened. The invitation, they entered together this time. Charles, Evelyn, Henry, Clara, shapes half human, half shadow. And behind them, something worse. The 5th. It was him. Another Daniel stepped into the room. Same clothes, same face, but his eyes were hollow lanterns, glowing with cold fire. The other Daniel smiled. "You've already written me," Charles spread his arms. "The family is complete," Evelyn whispered. "Sit at the table, Daniel." The notebook flipped itself open. The pen rose, hovering over the 8th page. Clara leaned close, giggling. Finish the line, the defiance Daniel's mind raced. If his writing gave them form, then maybe it could also take it away. He grabbed the pen. His double lunged, but Daniel shoved him back and scrawled across the page. "The 5th chair is empty." The air cracked like thunder. His double screamed, body flickering, unraveling into threads of shadow. But the others roared, their forms twisting violently. Evelyn shrieked, "You cannot erase what you've created." Daniel forced the pen harder. "Then I'll erase all of you." He scratched deep into the paper, tearing it as he wrote. "There is no family. There is nothing across the street." The collapse. The house shuddered. Across the street, the glowing windows burst, spilling darkness into the night. The family's shapes warped, collapsing into ash and smoke. Charles's booming voice tore through the room one last time. "You cannot erase us all. You can only replace us." And then they were gone. The notebook slammed shut. The ending Daniel sat trembling in the silence, the pen still in his hand. He dared to hope it was over, but when he looked out the window, The house across the street was still there. Only now, the curtains were open, and in the window, he saw himself. Not the hollow-eyed double, not a reflection, another Daniel sitting at the table, already writing in a notebook identical to his. The real horror dawned. He hadn't destroyed the family. He had taken their place. The fifth chair was filled with him.